All right, what is up, everybody? This is Brandon from ComixKings, and yeah, I just got a shirt for the podcast, so that's super cool. Picked it up yesterday, but anyway, this is my segment of Tag Team Thursday. We started with Rod at 6:30, then we went over to John, and then we went over to Tony for happy hour, and then we went to Dan. Now it is my show. We're going to be talking about kind of this week's news. Let's shout out everybody in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We got Todd Christensen in the house. How are you doing, sir? We got PJ King. We got Rod. Yes, sir. We got Fable. What's happening? William. We got Dan. Comic Chop News. We got Simple Simon. No Good Comics. We got Flash by Night, and we got Jen in the house so far. Thank you, everybody, for joining. 11 people in the house right now, and I'm going to be kicking off the news segments. This is Crisis on Infinite Rant, so you never know what's going to happen in this video. I never know what's going to happen going into it, but I got a lot of stuff to talk about, starting with the preview of Amazing Spider-Man number 61 that dropped today. This is written by Nick Spencer, of course, like it's been for the past 61 issues, and art by Patrick Gleason. Marvel's still using Patrick Gleason on this Spider-Man title, and we kind of got a preview of the new suit. Not really much behind it yet. We're going to figure that out, but it's just Spider-Man swinging around, and we got Kingpin holding a meeting of a bunch of villains, Spider-Man villains, of course, and it is basically saying, hey, let's get this guy. Let's get Boomerang. So we're bringing back Boomerang because Nick Spencer doesn't know how to cut characters off and give them closure. It's like he's introducing a bunch of things out of like sequential order and trying to pay homage to his favorite Spider-Man stories or seminal Spider-Man stories, but he's just butchering them all. He's a talented writer. It's just not with Spider-Man. Next piece of news we got is Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which is going to be an 8-issue series. Got released, or it didn't get released, got announced few days ago, 3 days ago, which by Tom King and Bill Evely. Bill Evely did a few issues of Detective Comics. I think he did 1031 and 1032, or 1030, 1031. He did somewhere around there. I wasn't exactly a big fan of his art, but I'm a fan of Tom King, and this is kind of going to be a little bit similar to his Up in the Sky story on Superman, so I'm excited for it. It's going to be like a pinup on Supergirl, kind of discussing how she's always in the shadows of Superman, and I hope Tom King can figure out a way to break apart from that kind of cliches that she's just like Superman and give her own energy. She hasn't had an ongoing series since Rebirth, so this is definitely like a breath of fresh air for this character that I am excited for. Next, we're going to go back to Marvel a little bit. We're going to be jumping a little bit around between publishing companies. We got Dr. Doom becoming Dr. Juggernaut. If you guys want to see these references, I don't really have them with me, but if you do want to see these references, you can go to CBR, go to any of your news articles, even watch some of these artists post them on Instagram. I know Jason Aaron has been posting a lot about the Heroes Reborn, which is basically, I didn't have enough time in my Avengers run to introduce Squadron Supreme, but we're doing it. And Heroes Reborn has been very contradictory even from the start, especially with the name Heroes Reborn. Yeah, Dr. Doom becomes Dr. Juggernaut in order to fight Hyperion. So if you guys know, some of you guys don't know this already, but if you do, you'll know exactly what I'm saying. Squadron Supreme was made in the 1970s to combat the Justice League. So every character in there matches a Justice League character. So we got Hyperion, Amphibian, the amphibian character matching Aquaman. I'm not too familiar with this squad. Nighthawk, Dr. Spectrum, and Wizard. So they're all kind of matching. And we got that princess girl that got the Archer variant, looks exactly like Wonder Woman, which I'm not a fan of. But like Fable said, I am on the fence about Heroes Reborn just because I've been in and out of Jason Aaron's Avengers. I've been keeping tabs on it ever since I stopped reading it after the Ghost Rider run. So basically that was all three Ghost Riders are fighting each other. Cosmic Ghost Rider, Danny, and Robbie Reyes, and then Johnny Blaze. They're kind of all fighting each other against the Cosmic Ghost Rider, and we're just figuring out what that happens. That spun out of Guardians of the Galaxy, crossover in the Avengers series. But what Avengers 700, what that introduced was a bunch of different plot points that Jason Aaron could have gone with, and he went with neither. He pissed off Mephisto, which is not hard to do. The Avengers are like at war with everybody. They were going to declare war on Namor and the Russians, but each kind of spun out into their own series, except for everything going on with the Russians. that was more of a War of the Realms kind of thing that they dealt with. While the name Heroes Were Born to remind people about the horrible Liefeld reboot years ago. Exactly. That's why I'm on the fence with it, because it's not a very welcoming introduction to this. By the way, after this show, we are going to go over to Justin at No Good Comics. Okay, but Jason Aaron just did not go any of them. He went to the Ghost Rider War, which then went to Starbrand, which then went to fighting Moon Knight, and Moon Knight taking over the Avengers' powers. Now we're in this Phoenix arc, which is kind of doing a disservice to the Phoenix Force that Claremont introduced. So I'm not exactly a fan of this. I'm not exactly a fan of the way he's been writing She-Hulk, kind of being like overexposed to Gamma, but Blade's cool. Some of the characters are cool. It's not a series for me. Flashpoint Knight, I think Heroes Reborn. Let's write something new with establish it. Squadron Supreme has never really been established. It's been mostly been let's rip off Justice League and kind of give them a match. But now he's just taking characters and crossing them over with others just to combat Hyperion, which I'm again not a fan of. We got crossover, bringing the Valifax to be a very key point in God Country over at Image, written by Donny Cates. Of course, we've been waiting for him to bring in the Valifax, which is a symbol of God Country. And even in that book, he did like a full 3 pages of self-promotion. He's like to Jeff Shaw, hey man, let's bring this back. Let's do it. So if you guys are reading crossover and you haven't read God Country, pause and go read God Country, because it's very essential to this story. You can get away with not knowing a bunch of these characters that Donny Cates is bringing into this crossover book, but this is one of where you kind of have to know what the Valifax is and the mythos behind it. So go read God Country. It's a great book anyway. It's just, of course, Donny Cates is just going to self-promote his work. Okay, and then we have Milestone coming back and bring back Hardware, and then Icon and Rocket, and then we have Static, which is going to be written by Vita Ayala, and then we got Brandon Thomas writing Hardware with Dennis Cowan and Bill Sienkiewicz, and then the Icon and Rocket story is written by Reginald Hudlin, which I'm not exactly the biggest fan of his work after what he did in Moon Knight. David Finch's art was great, but his story to me wasn't. So if you guys are a Milestone fan of that imprint, definitely go check that out. I'm not exactly as excited for that anyway. I'm not really excited. This week in news was more, okay, let's try to get people excited for stuff that they shouldn't be excited for, right? Like Heroes Reborn, not excited for it. It's just not doing it for me. So I think May is kind of where I'm going to be putting a little bit of a halt on my Marvel issues or like my mainstream like Avengers, even though I haven't been picking them up. Now I'm not even going to do it. And like John said, right, remember we finished Tag Team Thursday over at No Good Comics, okay? So after this, we're going to go close out with Justin. It may go into extra innings. It may not. You never know. But Justin is a great guy. He's a fun show. So we're going to head over there in about 6.5 minutes. And then last bit of news we got DC Comics with their bad books. It's like we have a whole bunch of backstory. So it's like you have the main issue and then you have the backstory, which is kind of their way of including niche characters like Red Hood, Batman and the Outsiders, Punchline, Grifter. A Justice League Dark has a backup story, and it's kind of I would rather appreciate these characters have a solo series rather than being in like the back end of a Justice League book. Like Justice League Dark, their title sold well when they were written by Ron V and James Tynion the fourth, but now they're kind of a backup story. So I'm not as excited for these stories as much as I want to be. I would much rather prefer Outsiders be its own thing. I'd much rather see Red Hood be its own thing, because we really have never had a defining Red Hood story that has really set him apart as his own. You know, he's always kind of been that backup guy, that person who surrounds himself with other people. Red Hood and the Outlaws did nothing for Jason's character growth as Red Hood, as himself, because he was so dependent on the people around him. I want Jason to be independent on his own, and he's not going to be able to do that in a backup story. The Grifter, which he first appeared in Batman 102, I believe 102 is coming back in the Urban Legends. So if you want to see another James Tynion the fourth character, have a backup story, because you also got the Punchline backup story that Dan and John were kind of talking about earlier. That is the last thing that I really want to see is more Joker. I think DC needs to take a big halt on Joker in everything. I think DC really needs to take just a slow back on all these Batman books, all these Joker books, because even when they had Black Label, they were still flooded with 5 Batman Joker stories at the same time. Tynion's just throwing stuff at the wall with his Batman. Well, here's the thing you got to realize. James Tynion is so focused right now on his indie work, which is doing, in my opinion, there's so much better stories. But when you're writing a character like Batman, you kind of have to throw it out there, introduce your own characters, because if they're popular enough and they get that movie attention, then he's making money off of a book that he really should have been off of a year ago. You know, James Tynion was not supposed to be the tenured writer on Batman. So, of course, he's just going to throw stuff at the wall right now. I wouldn't necessarily blame him for that. And then you got Superman, Action Comics, and the mainstream title are both written by Philip Kennedy Johnson. So if you read the last DC one-shot, The House of L, it's kind of introducing what Philip Kennedy Johnson is going to be doing. And if you read the Bendis run, if you read Peter Tomasi's, they're both different, but they're kind of similar in like the way that Superman is written, that family aspect. Philip Kennedy Johnson is going to be taking him kind of more on a Last God adventure. So it's going to be more like The Last God, written more like that rather than the Superman that we know. So it's going to be like Superman combined with King Arthur in space. So I'm down for it. Philip Kennedy Johnson is going to be writing for both Marvel and DC. So again, I'm excited. He's definitely up and coming. So I'm definitely excited for Superman. I'm excited to see his growth. And yes, he is doing Alien, which has a crap ton of covers. I'm not exactly a big speculator when it comes to variant covers, because I just read it for the stories, not necessarily for the cool art on the cover. It's definitely an attraction, but there are cool covers out there for the cover price of the actual book. Every now and again, I'll get an incentive cover. Like I got the Noctera 1/25 variant just because this is like the biggest hype week in comics. Bendis made Superman look like he really did. Bendis is taking over the Justice League team book, which is okay. Let's just take Naomi and give her own thing in the Justice League, which again, I just don't think DC is necessarily doing all of the right things as an industry. I think they could be doing a little bit more for their characters and their growth, because if we're just pumping out Batman and Superman stories, boom, 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 and now Wonder Woman, we're just banking off those 3 stories to be successful and not necessarily grow your lower characters, then you're not really setting in there for your future, right? Your future is in your niche characters, whether people like it or not. Niche characters help drive the universe, you know? They kind of give that separation and different sense of enjoyment that we won't get from a Batman story or a Superman story. So I don't know. I want to be excited for DC. I'm excited for the Nightwing book by Tom Taylor, which is already got reviews off the wall. It got amazing reviews, but that's not necessarily. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I love Nightwing. I just want to see if it's gonna be as good as people are saying. But anyway, I'm gonna be wrapping up here in just a minute, because we are gonna go over to we're going to go over to Justin at No Good Comics. Sorry about that. We're going over to Justin at No Good Comics. Just a few quick announcements. I'm going to be having a Thor Volume 1 review coming out, I believe, this Saturday. And then I am going to be having my weekly comic wrap-up review where I deep dive into some of the books I read this week, give you my thoughts about them. And then I have Creative Corner coming back. I have an Amazing Mary Jane review, because that Mysterio is back, which was from the Amazing Mary Jane story written by Leah Williams. That was a fun book, so definitely check that out. And now we are going to head over to Justin, our closer. I know it started a minute early on my page, but anyway, let's go over to Justin, No Good Comics. Make sure you guys summon up everybody who made Tag Team Thursday happen. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining me. This is Brandon from the ComixKings. Got my own shirt now. I'm super pumped about that. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me.